Hello everyone, I'm Drachona. Today, I want to talk about racism. Yeah. At this point, you're probably thinking, this could go well, or this could go horribly. But I just want to put my opinion out there. You'll notice I'm looking down. I have a lot to say. I want to put my opinion out there about one particular question. Is racism exclusive? Now, what I mean by that is, can only certain groups be racist, and can only certain groups be affected by racism? I had a roommate when I was going to UNC Charlotte. He was a great guy. We had a lot of fun, and we always got along, never had any problems. And there were a couple times where we got into conversations about social issues, just whatever. A lot of times there were things that he had talked about in class, and we just ended up talking about them. And one of them was about racism, specifically regarding majority versus minority. His perspective was that racism can only happen from a majority to a minority. For example, white people towards non-white people. And I completely disagreed. First off, majority is a very relative concept. I mean, are you talking about global majority? Are you talking about national majority? Or are you talking about local majority, as in a particular building or area? Because depending upon where you are, who the majority is and who the minorities are can vary. But more importantly, my opinion is that racism is racism. I don't believe that racism is exclusively prejudice plus power, because that almost excuses anyone who's not socially favored or who's not in the majority from being racist. And that makes no sense. Anyone can be offensive, and anyone can judge someone based on one single factor about them. For example, based on the color of their skin. The sad thing is that racism still exists. I don't think that there's an argument about this. It's kind of painfully obvious. And I'm not trying to argue that white people are significant victims of racism. I'm not trying to argue that. But to say that white people cannot be victims of racism is nonsensical. To say that the moment a person is born white, they are incapable of being affected by any kind of prejudice or any kind of negative action based solely on the color of their skin is, first of all, very arrogant, because that's almost unknowable on a global scale, and also because it presumes that racism will never occur in the future. How can you know that? How can you know that just because someone is white, not only have they never experienced any kind of racism, but they never will? How can you know that? And secondly, but most importantly, you're saying that only certain groups can be affected by racism and only certain groups can be racist. You're drawing lines between people and making assumptions about their experiences based solely on the color of their skin. You're saying that you know things about them, and you know that those things will continue to be true just because of their skin color. You're creating racial division. How is that not inherently racist? There's a difference between saying that things like racism or sexism or things like white privilege or male privilege still exist, and saying we need to do something about this because it's wrong, because it's bad. There's a difference between saying that and saying that only certain groups can be affected by something like sexism or racism. You're dividing people into groups and making universal assumptions about their behavior and about their experiences. Now, that doesn't mean that what you're doing isn't a good thing. You're pointing out problems and saying, hey, we need to do something about this. That's good, but that doesn't mean that any solution you come up with is a good one just because you're doing it for a good reason. And this is the battle that we're fighting. A lot of people don't have to be convinced that things like sexism or racism exist. The problem is that there are people out there who are looking for sexism and racism and things, and they come up with new issues that don't really serve to inform people about the existence of something like sexism or racism, but instead create divisions between people based on massive assumptions and ridiculous generalizations that obscure the issue more than actually trying to solve it. And then, when other people criticize the person who makes those arguments or those statements, automatically you see other people jumping on them and claiming that somehow they support or ignore things like sexism or racism, that because they're arguing against this person, they're automatically for sexism or racism. And because the first person was acknowledging a legitimate issue, they often get a pass and sometimes are even victimized regardless of whether or not their opinions are logical or well-researched. The argument quickly shifts from the topic at hand to battles between the person who started the conversation and their supporters and the people who are critical of their perspective. We're no longer talking about the issue, we're talking about these people arguing about what this person said. But they automatically are right just because they're talking about a legitimate issue, because they're doing it for a good cause. My roommate would probably gain support because he's tackling a legitimate issue, and he's doing so for a good reason, because he cares. But there are a lot of people who do the right thing for the wrong reasons, and there are a lot of people who do the right thing for the right reasons, but that doesn't mean that their opinions on the issue or their solutions to it are inherently good or factually based. A person's heart can be in the right place and they can still be misinformed or have bad ideas. And this is the problem that we have, especially in the age of mass connectivity. Just because someone fights for a good cause doesn't mean that they're well informed or that their opinions about the cause are good and progressive. But we defend these people for fighting for a good cause, even to the point of ignoring logical criticism. If someone said, Hitler is a monster, and I said, now wait a minute, automatically people would assume that I'm supporting Hitler, that I'm somehow pro-Hitler. Yes, I'm defending Hitler and saying that he's not a monster. You know why? Because calling someone a monster presumes that they were born evil. That they were destined to do horrible things. I would hope that every sociologist, every anthropologist, and every psychologist, or at least most of them, would support me in saying that who a person is based significantly on what they experience and how they internalize those experiences, what they think about what happens to them. People are not born evil. They become who they are through life experiences and through making choices. That's the big one. Making choices. How they respond to what they experience. My point is that there are people out there who would completely discredit me for saying that Hitler isn't a monster, and they would completely ignore the logical points I made to explain how a person is a result both of their experience and their choices. Everyone has the potential to do great things and horrible things. To demonize someone, to turn them into an archetype, that just suggests that any random person can't be just as horrible. You're saying that any random person can't do the same horrible things, that we are incapable because, lucky us, we weren't born evil. Nothing about our circumstances or the choices we make could ever make us horrible people. We're exempt from that because we weren't born evil. That's completely ridiculous. Or, here's a better example. My video, and plenty of other people's videos, about the whole sexism issue regarding the new Ghostbusters movie. The media is arguing that the only reason why people are upset about the trailer and about the movie in general is because the movie stars women. And they're completely ignoring all of the legitimate criticisms of the trailer. And just the obvious fact that the trailer is not that good. They're completely ignoring that. The trailer ends with, "The power of Patty compels you!" That is the big ending note for the trailer. That's the, you will see this movie. You know, the the moment where they try to suck you in with one last good line or one cool moment, that's it. The power of Patty compels you. Yeah. But because the media is arguing from the standpoint that they're against sexism, anyone who argues with them or opposes them is automatically treated as sexist. Suddenly the argument becomes about sexism instead of about the actual issues with the movie. But there are people who will defend the people who are making the sexist argument just because they're making an argument that is against sexism and completely ignore how awful the trailer looks. There are so many great things about the information age. So many people have agency. They can say what they think. They can put their ideas out there and other people can comment on them. They can get feedback. That's great. But the biggest problem we have is that we defend people for saying whatever they want, even if it ends up being more destructive than helpful, just because they're doing it for a good cause. We should not judge someone based on what cause they stand behind, but instead based on why they stand behind it. Otherwise, logic and fact won't always win, and we'll spend less time actually progressing and more time arguing amongst ourselves over things that we agree need to be dealt with. I'm Drachona. Have a nice day.